Hey guys, it's Wednesday. Welcome in to everybody that wandered by this evening. I appreciate you all being here. It's middle of the week. It's a cozy evening, and I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm wearing a at reindeer t-shirt because I'm a nerd. So that is my attire for this evening. Tonight we are going to be continuing reading Age of Darkness, starting with chapter 11. We left off last time at the end of chapter 10. So we're going to pick right back up at the beginning of chapter 11. I think we have enough time to get through chapter 13. If we have a little bit more time and I'm feeling up to it, I may read into chapter 14. I know, right? Shocker. So, yes. I know, I'm very much a nerd. So let me get my screens situated over here. I really wish that I could figure out a way to automate that. All right. So for anybody else who is new into the channel, or for anybody that wandered by, my name is Meshla. I am primarily an audiobook streamer. What that means in my case is that I write and read Star Wars fanfiction and have been doing so for the last 25 years. I started off cooperatively back in 2000, and for the initial probably 15 years or so, maybe yeah, I'd say the first 15 years or so I was writing cooperatively, and for about the last 10 I've been writing pretty much solo. So it's it can be a challenge when you're writing solo, but it's also interesting because you get to see what you can pull out of your brain when you're writing. So it's been really fun. I also play a Star Wars Old Republic on occasion, every other Wednesday, and am in the process of considering some other games to add into the stream for a little variety. And that's about it. If you have any questions about the stories, me as a writer, me as a streamer, anything like that, please feel free to ask in the chat and I will get to the questions as I can. Please don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm happy to answer them as much as I'm able to. And I see Yast and Zoo in chat. If I could get a shout out for Yast and Zoo, that would be great. Give me just 1 second. Just checking something real quick. Thanks. Appreciate you. Okay. Alrighty. And if there's anybody else in the chat that we missed with some shoutouts, please feel free to let one of my mods know. And and we will get that taken care of. Oh, could I get a shout out for Sin if you're able to? Right. If oh, I wish. All right. Sorry, I'm getting stuff situated still. Okay. Oh, it's not gonna let me do that because I haven't posted anything in chat yet. Yeah. I just realized that. Yet being the keyword. He'll probably throw a hydrate at me in the next little while. Yes. Oh, I need a mod love command. That's a great suggestion. Yes, actually. We need to add that to our list. Let me get something to write on. Yes. I'm gonna start myself a list actually before I start reading. Alright. Yes, I have pens and paper and all kinds of things hanging out off to my left. Well, right, actually. I can't even keep track of which hand is which one. It's been a busy day. Yes, that was an excellent suggestion. Thank you, Yast. We are still working up a list of commands, and I will eventually figure out how to make them all fancy and have noises and things like that. I haven't figured that out yet. For the moment, these will do. Alright. So I suggest you guys get comfy, find a blankie, find a warm drink, get cozy. Yes, I saw him too. Okay. Alrighty. Chapter 11. Catan, Royal Palace, the day before Renese's party. Andrea looked up at the sound of a soft rapping on the old wooden door of the study she sat in. She'd been near the small fireplace in the room, holding a book she used for a journal and writing a few lines of her thoughts about recent events. "Come in," she said, turning to see who it was. Taking a deep breath, Marin pushed the door open. The hinges creaked softly in protest as the door moved. Andrea had summoned her following another lesson. Marin was still fussing slightly with her fresh tunic as she gently pushed the door closed behind her. The air carried the comforting scent of smoldering wood as Marin slowly approached the empty chair beside the fire. Sorry. "Marin," Andrea said with a smile as she closed her book. "I'm sorry to call you here so soon after today's training, especially with Renese's party tomorrow." Marin's forehead creased in a frown as she glanced at her teacher. She was indeed looking forward to it. He'd made sure to include everyone, and it would give the students a break from their studies. "I'm looking forward to it, teacher. But what's this about?" Her tone was slightly confused. "There was a group of refugees from Telos, mostly agricultural combine people," Andrea said. "They were exploring some of our worlds in the Tanaga system, including the forest moon on which your home is located." That got Marin's attention. "When was this? Did they find—" Andrea held up a hand. "No, they didn't find the house when they passed over the moon a few days ago. I told the minister who spoke with them not to give them an answer until I spoke to you and got your thoughts on the matter." Marin bit her lip. She sighed. "I don't know." "That's why I felt we needed to talk it out," her teacher said, gesturing again to the chair. "Please, this might take a while, and you won't want to stand the entire time." With a sigh, Marin sank into the chair. "Do you have some tea?" she asked softly, nervously smoothing her tunic again. Andrea motioned to where she had had a tray brought in, sitting on the low table nearby. She poured them both a cup and handed Marin hers. Several areas in that system would suit their farming needs, but they had mentioned the forest moon that you call home first. Marin nodded her thanks as she took the cup and cradled it for a moment before she took a sip. "Did they say why?" Andrea nodded softly. "Something about a soil check they did was better for the crop they usually grow. They had spoken of needing to clear an area for their homes and plants, and use the timber they felled to build their homes. They wouldn't take anything away and would use as many natural materials instead of artificial ones as they possibly could. That part got my attention as well. I was surprised they would respect the land in that way." "That is unusual," Marin frowned. She had to admit she felt rather selfish about it, which surprised her a little bit. The realization caused her to shift uncomfortably. "I had a team check the locations they tested after they presented their request. There's another area that checked out very close to your home. I have considered the situation since the minister brought it to my attention, but I feel that this is just as much your decision as it is mine. Maybe some limitations on how far they could go," she continued, "things of that nature. That's why I needed you to come see me." Marin was silent for a long moment as she pondered that. Another sip of her behot helped soothe her nerves. I hadn't even considered the possibility. How would we enforce such restrictions? She frowned again and fussed with her braid briefly. I don't think that it will be a concern, Andrea told her. At least, I felt no sense of ulterior motive in the ones that arrived, other than that they wanted to settle and finally have something close to a permanent home. Of course, the sadness of having to leave the world they called home is shared by many right now. I can identify with that, Marin replied softly, recalling when Jairus had found her all those years ago. She sighed once more. I can't deny them that. It's just, she sighed, at a loss for words how to explain her feelings. They said they didn't need an immediate decision, her teacher told her as she sipped at her own tea. They're staying on board their ships at Kingston Port, and we don't need to decide tonight. In fact, it wouldn't be wise. Perhaps we should meditate on it during your studies and let the Force guide the choice. Yes, teacher. Marin nodded as she sat back and sipped at her tea again. I guess I've never really thought about it. It's a big part of what I have that reminds me of my father. She finished softly as she stared into the fire. I'm just thinking out loud, Andrea said as she sat there and looked at the edges of the fireplace, but never directly into it. If I remember correctly, having never seen it, your father built your home into part of a mountain. Being farmers, that terrain wouldn't suit them at all. Marin smiled slightly at that. Yes, mountains and heavily forested. Andrea shrugged, took another sip of her tea, and decided to change the subject. With Ethan, Zan, and Callista here, and with talk of more trouble brewing with Deathwatch, I suppose you will want to travel with them if they allow it. Marin perked up. More trouble? Andrea cast her a look. They haven't told you of Deathwatch being more direct in their movements? Marin shook her head. No, they didn't tell me. Last I heard, they'd been run off Galan after we found them there. They've been trying to push into the system again? Not into Galan, no, Andrea said as she thought about it. I only know bits and pieces. Perhaps Ethan, Zan, or even Callista would be a better source for you to ask. She looked at the fire beginning to die down and at the clock above the mantel. It was getting late in the evening. Hi, Lord. How are you? I'll do that, Marin replied with a nod as she drained the rest of her tea. Catan Royal Palace, Edmonton, the morning of Renee's party. Marin did her best to straighten her skirt after the sudden ride from the Praxium to the castle. The message that Andrea needed her presence there came during the middle of a training exercise, and she had rushed through cleanup from the day's workouts before heading towards the castle. One of the stewards was leading her down the outer corridor. She looked around carefully, knowing that the area she was heading to had several chambers that were often used for diplomatic meetings and functions. Coming around a corner, Andrea was waiting just outside a set of closed doors and looked up as she saw Marin approaching. Marin, she said as she watched her Padawan come down the hall, I apologize for not being there this morning for our normal training and for having to distract you from what you were working on, but this is important. Marin frowned and tucked her Padawan braid behind her ear. What's this about, Master? She asked formally, conscious of her surroundings. It still felt strange having to choose the form of address. Marin could understand calling Andrea Master, but she was never sure when to address her teacher as Your Highness. She wore a deep blue tunic and black skirt in the Praxium's colors. She had braided her dark hair down her back, save the Padawan braid and the saber resting on her belt. Andrea looked down the corridor once more. Do you remember the conversation we had a couple of days ago? I do, Marin said, after a moment. Andrea motioned to the room slightly down the hall. The minister is meeting with the delegation to discuss settling in the Tanaga system. I've spoken with them this morning, and we've discussed several things, but I feel it might be a good idea for you to join us. Marin raised an eyebrow. What exactly was discussed? Would they be given a portion of the planet? She sighed and then leaned against the wall momentarily, rubbing the back of her neck before she fingered Jarius's ever-present tags around her neck. It was a habit she'd picked up years ago when she was nervous or worried about something. Andrea turned and looked at her student and judged her reactions. "Don't be so quick to jump to conclusions and assumptions, Marin," she said. Marin flushed. "Nasita," she said softly, looking away momentarily. She hadn't realized how deeply she'd connected with her home. Chewing her lip nervously, Marin tried to bring her emotions under control. When Andrea had brought it up a couple of days ago, she wasn't very concerned. But now? She sighed and closed her eyes for a moment. Andrea felt this and moved closer, turning to lean against the wall next to Marin. "Have you tried to meditate on it as I suggested?" Marin nodded. "I have. It's hard to let go. Home and the Praxium are all I've known for 8 years. I want to help. I really do. But I don't know how to let go." "This isn't about letting go of your home," Andrea told her as she rested a hand on her student's shoulder. "You remember when I told you about options where your land there wouldn't be infringed upon?" Marin nodded. "I do remember. How could that be enforced, though?" Oh, sorry. I'm gonna do this. And this. "That was what we discussed this morning, actually," Andrea said, gesturing for Marin to follow her. "Hey, Grist, welcome in." "I've expressed your concern to those representing the group, and options were discussed rather in depth. I'm impressed by their reactions and discussion. I have probed them in the Force, and I believe that we can trust them." "All right," Marin allowed after a moment's thought as she smoothed her skirt and tunic again, just as they paused in front of the doors that led to the meeting chamber. She looked sideways to Andrea. "Would it be better if I referred to you as Your Highness or Master? Master?" Her question was quiet. She looked... Andrea smiled and gave Marin a wink. "They know you are my student, so Master will work for this case." Marin let out a barely audible sigh of relief, followed by a slight grin as she caught Andrea's wink. Still smiling slightly, the doors opened to admit them. In the few moments that it took to enter, Marin calmed herself and focused on the matter at hand. Her thoughts went briefly to Jared before she pulled her attention back to the present. "Minister," Andrea said as they entered. The others had all stood and bowed. Andrea returned the bow slightly, motioning to Marin and introducing her to the group. Upon hearing this, one of the delegates came forward and bowed to Marin. "We've been told about the circumstances with our request to settle on the moon where your home is. I hope you will join us and hear our discussion." "Hi, Sin. Welcome in." "Second dinner? I approve, sir." "I definitely approve of second dinner." Marin's cheeks pinked slightly, and she took a slow breath, resisting the urge to look towards Andrea. She knew probing people without their consent was generally impolite, but she had to know. She laid her fingers gently on his arm, the contact sending a jolt up her own arm as she got a sense of him. She could have probed him in the Force without touching him, but something told her physical contact would be better. She breathed slowly, sensing the man's emotions. There was sadness, the loss of his home and his hearing about her loss, but there was also hope. She probed a little deeper, but felt no deceit, so she withdrew as delicately as possible. "I would like to hear your thoughts on what has been discussed," she said, finally. He smiled as Andrea gestured for everyone to take their seats. He then nodded to his assistant, who pulled up a small hollow projection of the moon from the survey they had made. "Her Highness, your teacher did not tell us of your home's location since she does not know it, and we respect the concern," the delegate said as he highlighted the northern hemisphere. "She did say that it was on the northern part of the moon. With all of the mountains, it's not an area we would want to work in. The southern half, however, has several large and open areas where we could build and begin our agriculture projects again." He turned to look at Marin. "We had looked at several areas, but with the crop seeds we're growing for export, the soil content here was the closest match that would give us our best chances for a high yield. Your teacher mentioned your concerns about needing to enforce conditions, his assistant said as he leaned forward and shut down the hologram. We have told her and the minister that we are perfectly willing to be a protectorate of the Katani forces, another colony, if you will, and we will be fully submissive to your laws. This would be true anywhere we settle, but we wanted you to know this. We wanted you. But we wanted you to know that we are sincere in our respect for your home. Andrea nodded, having heard it earlier. She then looked to Marin and wondered how her Padawan was taking all of this. Marin sat quietly, taking it all in as she scanned the room, again getting a sense of each of the delegates. They were sincere. It surprised her a little bit, but she shrugged it off. Her forehead creased briefly in a frown. You'll be growing crops. How will you bring in the needed machinery unless you have it with you? She asked with a slightly raised eyebrow. Thank you for the follow!
Witty is now following.
The equipment we use isn't massive in size, the lead delegate answered. We were able to load most of what we needed onto a Galloway freighter, our equipment for raising the crops as well as what we could need to cut and process the timber for our homes and support buildings. Well, hello there. Another assistant wanted to add more to his comment. When we've cleared an area for our production, we've always been taught to use what we've cleared and not waste anything. All timber we cut would be used and not just thrown away. We have an ad starting in 4 minutes and 49 seconds, just so you guys are aware. It's good to see you, Uncle. That made Marin smile a little, and she nodded, sharing a look with Andrea. That's good. The Katani people take great care and respect their natural surroundings. I'm glad that you will, too. She fell silent as she thought again. This time, she turned to the minister. Minister, as Tanagas is an outlying colony of the Catan system, would it fall under the protection of the Katani Navy? Without question, the minister told her. Our other colonies on the inner planets of the Tanaga system, the entire system as a whole, is under the protection of the 5th Battle Group. The moon we're talking about here would definitely be protected. Thank you, Minister, Marin said politely. She thought about it some more, glancing towards Andrea and then the minister before looking to the delegates themselves. Would it be permissible to help the colonists set up basic security? We'd need a way to reach the 5th Battle Group at need as well. She hoped she wasn't overstepping her place with that question. We've agreed to set aside an area to house armed personnel, the head delegate said, looking towards the minister. We will also have a communication relay that allows us to contact you for help at any time. Thank you, Marin said with a nod and a look to the minister. That answered all of the questions she had for the moment. Andrea looked over. Would you like some more time to meditate on it? Marin shook her head. No, Master, I don't feel I need to. She didn't even blink at mixing her languages now, but she saw a few delegates look at each other. Would you like to wait outside for a moment, then? The delegate asked her, wondering what would happen next. Marin shook her head. There's no need. I've made my decision. And that is, my lady? This came from the minister himself. Marin blushed slightly at the honorific, but composed herself quickly. I accept, she said, firmly, looking squarely at the head delegate as she said so. Let me try that again. The delegates looked at each other with smiles and handshakes as they got up to thank her for her decision. Andrea smiled from where she sat before she stood up. Now that the hard part is over, I'm sure finalizing the details with the minister won't be difficult. If you could excuse us, please. She motioned for Marin to follow her as they exited the room. Marin bowed politely and followed Andrea, breathing a sigh of relief as they exited into the hallway. I knew how hard that was for you to accept at first, Andrea said after they were in the corridor and the door had closed behind them. I think it was a good decision. Thanks, Rafe. You saw that, didn't you? Mm-hmm. I see you over there. Mm. There's your hydrate. Oh man, my shoulders are crunchy. Um. Oh, by the way, Wraith Witty is my uncle. Whitey, welcome into the chat. It's good to see you. All right. Yeah, I need to stop slouching. Okay. Actually been streaming for almost a year. So yeah. Ta-da! But now you do. I stream every Wednesday and every other Sunday. That's okay. It's okay. You've had other things to focus on, but I'm glad you're here. Alrighty. Oh man. I sit far too much. I'm gonna do another freebie stretch before I do that one. Okay. Alright. Give me 1 sec, guys. Okay. Alrighty. But you're here now, so enjoy while you can. I'll be streaming until about 9 Eastern. Okay. And I think our ad's about to start. Maybe. The little thing at the top of the chat disappeared, so I think we're about to have an ad. Okay. Maybe. Twitch is weird sometimes. Oh, well, have a good night at work. Lissai. Alright. Yeah, it's going to be popping up any second. There we go. I'll be back in a minute. And we're back from our ad. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it. The ads help support the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, you are more than welcome to do so, but I would never require or ask that of you. I would like you to support as you wish. If you would like to remove ads, there are multiple ways to do so. You can use your free Prime sub. You get 1 of those a month to give to 1 streamer. And they have to be manually renewed every month. Or you can subscribe using Twitch itself, Twitch Turbo, or I think there's like, Yeah. You can also support the channel via bits or anything like that if you so desire, and it is appreciated when you're able to. For myself, I'm just here to offer you stories. Yeah, Turbo is amazing. Turbo is great because you pay a flat fee and it supports it does provide a little bit to each of the streamers that you watch, and it removes ads all across Twitch instead of having to pay a separate specific subscription to that streamer. The one upside to subscribing to a particular streamer is you get all their fancy emotes based on whatever tier you subscribe at. But if you want to pay just a flat fee, Twitch Turbo is the way to go, honestly. Because that's what I do. I have a couple of subscriptions to a couple of streamers, and then I have, because I want their emotes or I just want to support them more directly, and then I do Twitch Turbo. Oh, I know. Yeah, Turbo is fantastic in that particular case, definitely. So just a little PSA for you guys. Unfortunately, like I said, I don't have any control of the fact that there are ads. That's just the nature of being on Twitch. I do try to space my ads out so that they're not super long. They're about a minute and a half every half hour. It gives you, I try to do it that way so that it gives you enough time to get water, get a snack, give your kids a hug, snuggle your pets, things like that. Take your meds if you're gonna do that. Which, speaking of, thank you for that PSA, Lord. I appreciate you, sir. I've had a snack, I've had water, and my meds are ready to go. So I'm on point tonight. Hey, Zenny. Hey, you know what? That's okay. I can definitely identify with that. It's like that with kind of any new game. So I feel that. So welcome in, and I hope you enjoy your Hobbit house building while you have a listen. Blame to you all you want. Alright. Trying to remember where I left off. Okay, yes. And also, yes, that was actually my uncle in the chat a little while ago. So that was cool. Yes. Alright, let's get back to our chapter here. It felt right. I didn't feel any deceit from any of them. Marin blushed slightly at having scanned the man without permission. Andre nodded at both what she said and what she felt. Sometimes it's necessary to do something like that. Openly asking permission may actually be more harmful. Marin nodded. I had to know for myself. Something my father heard once from a friend. It's always easier to ask forgiveness than permission. Marin nodded and turned to walk with Andrew as they made their way down the hall, away from the meeting chamber. She was silent for a long moment. So, what happens now? Are there any new reports on Deathwatch? Nothing that I've heard, per se. That would be a question left up to Ethan to answer, if not Zan or Callista. Marin frowned. Aren't they in council? I heard Dylan say something about it yesterday. I wouldn't want to intrude. I'd think about sending them a message that you want to know more about the Deathwatch movements. Ooh, sorry. Marin nodded. I'll see about getting a message to them. She thought briefly of Ethan, a faint smile touching her lips. He was a rough man, but she knew that deep down he did care for her. Ethan messaged me earlier. He said he should be in system in a few hours, something about a message he got from Zan's Padawan, Sharon. Who knows of him showing up? Andrea asked, because I doubt he's been told of the convocation. Marin frowned as she tried to remember. From what he told me, Sharon had sent him a message saying Zan wanted to speak to him while they were on Catan. He didn't mention the convocation at all. Zan already knows he's coming. I can pass the word along if you like. She frowned, surprised that Ethan hadn't mentioned having told Master Card. Andrea nodded and closed her eyes for a moment as they paused. I just let Father know that he'll be here. I think he was only semi-surprised at the news. Marin couldn't resist shaking her head. Ethan's not exactly subtle at times. She then looked at Andrea. If Deathwatch is going active again, he'll want to help. As will I. I'm sure they would want all the help they can get, Andrea said as they continued down the corridor. Mandalore's location is pretty close to the Imperial expansion regions. Marin cringed. That's not good, she said softly, remembering from her history how the Empire had used the Mandalorians. Well, the Sith had too. No, it isn't. This will affect much more than it already has. Her answer was a silent nod as they returned to the courtyard. Then she hugged Andrea briefly, not caring who saw. Andrea had become almost a mother to her and a very close friend. I'll be at the Praxium if you need me, she said, before she swung effortlessly into the saddle and arranged her skirts. Have a safe trip back, and may the Force be with you, Andrea said as she watched Marin begin to ride off. With a nod and a wave, Marin guided her horse through the gate and back towards the mountain. Okay. That's the end of chapter 11. I hope it will. That's kind of the whole point of me doing story time at 7 p.m. I know it's kind of late for you guys over there in the UK, but my hope is that even if it's not necessarily a cozy story, that you'll get cozy vibes and be able to relax. And I like doing it in the middle of the week because it gives you and me a chance to kind of unwind in the middle of the week. It's been a little crazy for me at work. So I like to be able to kind of come home and share some stories with you guys. Well, thank you. Okay. 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 Chapter 12. You know, Nick Yar, Vincent Rain mused as he worked on placing a shaped charge on the security locks to a large Durasteel blast door. We're not being paid for this. Yeah, Nick nodded as he flipped his cigarette butt onto the grimy permacrete of the alley. His eyes were on the lights at the alley entrance, alert and ready for any sign of trouble. So we're not being paid. Vincent stood, and his long black trench coat flowed around him as he made his way down the alley, to be finding a safe space from the charge. We do not carry a debt to anyone, and there is no treasure or recompense from this mission. Again, Nick nodded as the shaped charge blew and the huge door slid open on tracks that desperately needed greasing. He called his lightsaber to his hand, and the hilt made from an old speeder bike handlebar. Yeah, so? So, my friend. Finch joined him at the looming doorway. His pale skin shone in the dim light. His eyes were nearly glowing red. He took his lightsaber from within his coat and ignited the crimson blade. We are dangerously close to doing something that the both of us have sworn to never do. Nick ignited his golden blade and shrugged. It was bound to happen sometime. The pirate grinned, his green eyes tinged gold by the light of his blade. I can think of worse ways to go all respectable. As he spoke, lights began to come up inside the massive hangar that the blast door had kept hidden. The thunder of booted footsteps stopped abruptly as several dozen hired thugs came rushing into view, blasters at the ready. Behind them, Glax Donna the Hutt moved his sizable weight incredibly fast toward a waiting hover sled. Vincent saluted the thugs as they raised their blasters to fire upon the two renegades. From the midst of their formation, the apparent leader stepped forward. A Trandoshan with dark green scales and obsidian eyes, he would have been an imposing figure if he'd been addressing anyone else. Leave this place and never return, he commanded, though his reptilian voice was just slightly shaky. And the exalted Glaxdana will let you... His words were interrupted by the discharge of a highly powered blaster. And what had been the Trandoshion's head was now a puff of red mist. The room was deathly silent. Vince turned to see the smoking barrel of Nick's DL-40 and the light dancing in his partner's eyes. "We're not leaving," Nick Yar said. "But if any of you want to see another day, you'll walk out of here and leave the slug to us. We've got some questions, and he has the answers." "And," Vince added, his blade at the ready, "we can assure you all that we will have the answers we seek. We are, when time allows, very persuasive." The thugs shook off their momentary disarray and opened fire. Nick and Vince ensured it was the last mistake those hired goons ever made. Fear played out in his overlarge eyes as the hut hovered, helplessly entangled in the force above a 300-meter drop. "I swear I don't know anything!" His voice, deep and booming, nevertheless, quivered. "Do you think a hut would bounce?" Nick turned to Vince, looking away from where he held the massive gangster with the force. They'd waded through the entirety of the hut's hired hands and chased the slug to a rooftop landing pad. Now they dangled him over the edge, inverted. "I highly doubt that," Vince said from his perch atop a stack of crates. "Given his sizable weight and his gelatinous form, it is more probable he'd simply splash upon impact with the Duracrete." "Such a lovely picture," Nick said, turning back to the dangling hut. "Maybe I'll just drop him to see which one of us guessed right." "No!" The hut's tiny arms waved madly at his sides. His huge eyes were turning purple as blood continued to rush to his head. I heard a rumor," he pleaded. "One of my bearable pets claimed there were caves on Barab 1 that we haven't found yet. It claimed that their savior dwelt there and would be coming to free them." "And where are these caves?" Vincent stepped closer to where Nick was dangling the hut. "I don't know." The hut shook his massive head. "I had the Barabel in my holding cells for interrogation, but it hasn't spoken yet." "The cells," Vincent said. "Where are they?" "Below the hangar. Below this building," Glaxona cried. His eyes were bulging with the pressure of being suspended as he was. "Now, will you please let me go?" Nick cast the hut a pitiful look. "Very poor choice of words," he said as he turned his back and released his hold through the force. The hut's scream echoed in the Duracrete canyons of Nar Shaddaa, but ended quickly enough with a wet splash. "Huh," Nick shrugged. "Looks like you were right." "Indeed." Vincent nodded as the two headed back for the rooftop access lift. "Shall we go and free some slaves, then?" "Freeing slaves. Us. Wow," Nick said as they boarded the lift. Broken and bloodied bodies lay strewn across the rooftop, a testament to the jewel's fighting prowess. "I know," Vincent nodded. "It's more than a little odd. What do you suppose this makes us?" "Big damn heroes." Nick smiled as he punched the button for the basement level. "Big damn heroes." Vincent chuckled as the lift doors closed. "I think I could get used to that." I'm gonna pause and take a drink here. I see that, Wraith. One of these days, I want to visit Ireland. I'll get there eventually, I'm sure. Okay. Okay. Alright. I'm not too upset by that hut going out that way. Just saying. Katani border territories. Cap? Mark Striker's voice was tentative over the open comm. Wesley Danick suppressed a grimace and chinned his headset mic. "Yes, 9. Are we there yet?" "Yes," Wesley sighed as he stared at the sea of stars. "We're here. Go ahead and pop your canopy. Let me know what the temperature's like." "Cold," Mark deadpanned. "Very cold." "Roger that," Wesley said. He glanced at his sensors. All of Black Hawk's squadron remained arrayed in a near-perfect delta formation. These were not the green pilots he'd brought into his command nearly 4 years ago. Hard time with the stick had forged them all into exemplary pilots. By some miracle or act of a vengeful god, they had retained their impermeable sense of humor. The captain grinned. It was a fine bunch he led. All of this made the current assignment much more difficult to swallow. The finest group of Katani Navy pilots were on a system-wide patrol mission before rendezvousing with Valkyrie for the indefinite future. It was why Wesley was allowing a certain amount of groaning from his pilots. He didn't like the situation any more than they did. However, the entire Navy was on constant alert with the Empire and others testing the waters around Katani space. It only made sense to have the best of the best out there in case they actually did run into something. The quiet on the commnet was rather unnerving. Tell me Stryker didn't actually go EV. Wesley put just a hint of a groan into his voice. I'd hate to have to file all that paperwork. That's a negative, Cap, Raz and Hawk 5 replied. He's just sulking. I'm brooding, Nine insisted. If you were a real woman, you'd find it irresistible. Permission to fire upon my flight leader? 5 asked. He's clearly unstable. Denied, 5. Wesley grinned. 9, stop sulking. Everyone, keep your eyes peeled. We're coming up on a sector that has reported activity. A mixed chorus of affirmative and roger that sounded in his headset before silence once again reigned over the open comm. Wesley checked his sensors again. They were running in full scan mode, relying on their speed to make up for the warning they'd give any hidden threats. Nothing was showing up, and Wes was impatiently tapping his foot. He quickly killed that urge and honed his focus to the task at hand. It wouldn't do for the captain to miss something. With this crew, he'd never hear the end of it. He saw the blip on a screen for the barest of moments before his comm crackled to life. Hawk 6. Gaia's voice flowed through the open comm with minimal distortion. Did you catch that lead? Affirmative, Wesley said, rolling his fighter onto an intercept course for the steadily growing blip. Break by flights and stay loose. Even out your shields and get your guns charging. 2. Try hailing them. The Black Hawks split in perfect unison into their separate flights. Stryker still had the lead of 3 flight, though it was now comprised of Doc, Raz, and Foxy. Capo had 2 flight with Squeak, Toner, and Null. This left Wesley in charge of 1 flight with Oso on his wing and the twins filling out the flight. Roger that, Nick calmed. Attention unidentified craft. You are entering Katani space. Strike your engines and shut down any weapon systems. Prepare for inspection. There was almost a full minute's pause as the Hawks slowly closed on their target. 2 and 3 flights spread out to port and starboard as 1 flight maintained a direct intercept course. Wesley was about to issue the command to hail them again when one large blip suddenly exploded into 24 smaller ones. Pirates! Hawk 3 cried in excitement. Finally! Stryker's relief was nearly tangible. Tell me we get to fake something, lead. Please? Wesley tightened his grip on the stick and allowed a feral grin to spread across his face. Unidentified craft, he said, over the open comm. We've issued a fair warning. If you continue your offensive posture, you will be fired upon. Oh, just say it, boss. Foxy's voice lost none of its sultry allure over the distortion. The pirates let loose with cannon fire from extreme range. Amateurs, Wesley thought and shook his head. Hawks, he said with a grin. Engage at will. So yes, there's a bunch going on in this chapter. Java. I mean, maybe. I possibly. Hi, Tava. Catan, capital city, fleet headquarters. Wesley Danik had been telling the truth when he informed his squadron that there was a meeting of the battle group commanders and the CAGs of each group with the various commanders from even the Marine divisions. He hadn't told them that the training sessions part of the explanation had already been covered several weeks ago. What was coming up, to his knowledge, was a full intelligence briefing. He and Admiral Payne had boarded the senior officer's flag shuttle aboard Valkyrie, and the shuttle had taken them from where she was moored in orbit on Catan towards the capital city on Catan. There had been no specification on uniform for the meeting, so Wesley had opted to wear a fresh duty uniform after he'd showered from the simulation runs. It was a belted jumpsuit in naval black with the insignia patch for his squadron on the upper left sleeve, and the Valkyrie's ship patch on the right, just below the Katani royal flag. His rank, 4 bars, was on both sides of the collar. Just below the squadron patch on the left sleeve was a band of green to denote that he was a pilot. As a unit's commanding officer, 4 red slashes were on the green to denote command. Payne also wore his duty uniform. The only difference was that instead of a rank pin of 4 bars, his was 2 stars from having been promoted to Vice Admiral after a review of his group's performance against the Bothan several years ago. Payne's also had only the ship's patch on the right sleeve, with the band on the left sleeve being solid red. I know that this is supposed to be an intel meeting, Wesley said, as he looked towards his commanding officer, but I wasn't told what we're supposed to be talking about. I wasn't given the full scoop either, Mather Payne said as he looked at his wrist chrono, but I imagine we're going to hear quite a bit. All the group commanders at the same time, Wesley said as he leaned back and checked to make sure his compact datapad was handy in his jumpsuit's thigh pocket. I was reviewing your after-action report on the run-in you had with the pirates, Payne said as he thumbed through a few screens on his datapad. Anything else you want to add to it, unofficially? Just a group of pirates that wanted to test us is my best guess. Wes thought about it and decided to air some personal thoughts. I guess with as much talk going around about how much ground the New Republic's been giving, I'm sure word has spread about the joint group of their 5th Fleet and our 3rd battle group at Ord Kenfrey. Some group of amateurs probably decided to see if we're giving much ground around our colonies. One would think that Admiral Nagala would have made that message loud and clear with Galan, Payne said as he shut down his datapad. If they didn't get the message then, I'm sure your squadron just gave them a reminder. I don't know what was worse, West told him. The fact that it was amateurs that didn't know how to really handle themselves in a dogfight, or my pilots biting at the bit to drop the hammer on them after news had reached us about 3rd Battle Group's losses. I heard that your brother and former exec's squadron was involved in that action. West nodded. They were, and my old squadron, along with the others, really gave the imps a run for their money, Admiral, he said as he toned his voice down a little. Another rumor circulating through the squadron needs to be brought up. What is it? West sighed now as the feeling when he'd first heard it came back up. Many people from 3rd were saying that it seemed like the New Republic forces didn't want to put up a fight at Ord Canfrey, that it was almost as if they were fine with the imps having the system. I've heard the same rumor myself, Payne told him, and having fought alongside the Republic forces on several occasions at Harlean, Endor, and elsewhere, I have to say I'm not too thrilled with the lack of grit they're showing now. Admiral, the shuttle pilot called from the forward cabin. We're on final approach to the hangar. Thank you, Payne said as they waited for the shuttle to set down. The pilot knew how to handle his craft, Wes having checked him out and given him command with the flag shuttle when the Admiral needed to make official visits. The pilot could fly smoothly, but could make the craft dance if needed in combat. Within a few moments of touchdown, Wes undid his crash harness and walked over to start opening the boarding hatch. As the senior officer, he let Payne go first down the ramp and noted that 2 junior officers were already waiting on the deck. Admiral Payne, Captain Dennick, the older of the 2, greeted them after salutes were exchanged. If you could accompany us, sirs, the meeting is set to start shortly. We have an ad starting in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, by the way. Payne motioned them to lead on as they started to leave the hangar and enter the main headquarters building for all of Catan's armed forces. The building was a simple but fair-sized circular design with only a few of its levels showing above ground. A vast majority of the facility was underground with several tramways leading to the Royal Castle, the Clans building, and several protected bunkers. It was Wes's first time in the headquarters building, and he didn't know exactly which level they were going to. It was several minutes before they started entering a large auditorium. There was a stage area with a blank screen behind it with the crest of the armed forces displayed on the screen itself. In the center of the stage stood a podium, and several other chairs were set in front of the stage. All the seats in the room were curved so that everyone faced the speaker. The two officers were led to their seats. As they settled, Wes started to look around and recognized most of the naval officers from the fleet's 10 battle groups, along with their wing commanders. Several others leading naval officers were also here with different unit patches and division colors. He noted that quite a few wore the Intelligence Division's gray band on their sleeves. The next thing that started getting his attention was that there were more Marine uniforms here, which meant that there were more commanders than he thought would be here. A lot more. "Have you noticed how packed the room is, sir?" he asked as he looked over at Payne. "Aye," Payne told him as he looked around as well. "We're in for something big." "Attention on deck!" All the officers stood as the side doors opened to the right. 6 officers started to file in, each wearing several stars on their collars. The Joint Chiefs, Wesley thought, as one with 4 stars moved to stand behind the podium. And I'm going to read like one more, and then we're going to stop because of our ad. "Be seated," Fleet Admiral Reyes Hollis said as he tapped a few controls to lower the lights except for those covering the stage. "I'll begin by informing all of our unit commanders here that this meeting is classified at the highest level. Violating this without prior orders will be considered treason and punished to the fullest extent." That got Wesley's attention. In meetings of this magnitude, the knowledge that whatever was said would be confidential went without saying. The ranking commander of Al-Qatan's naval forces stating it now gave the fighter pilot a sense of how serious this meeting was. And I'm going to stop right there because ad. So, see you guys back in a minute and a half once the ad starts. I know, the story's getting really good. Our ad's gonna start here in probably about 10 seconds. So I shall return once the ad is done. I'll be back. There we go. I absolutely love the fact that I have scene swap buttons on my Stream Deck. It's really useful. Welcome back from the ads, everybody. Hope I give you a chance to go get some water, get a snack, grab a cozy blanket, because we're about to get into it. Okay. Mm. With the rumors and talk that have been filling the ranks of our military, Hollis began, it's imperative that all of us, senior commanders in our fleets and defense installations, as well as other commanding officers, be on the same page with the facts of the situation at hand. Not just on a galactic scale, but also on how they pertain to our worlds. For the details, I yield the podium to Admiral Narchala. Hollis had left the podium, and West could see the other officer mentioned moving towards the podium. He had noticed that the chiefs wore a working version of the dress uniform instead of the duty jumpsuits like the rest of the pilots. The offset closure of the jacket on the Admiral's right side tipped him off. It was belted as well, and the closure had a line of gold along it to denote Narchala as a senior officer. The high-necked collar was in the division color and also held the rank pins, and he could see several service ribbons on the left breast. Hollis's uniform color was red, of the command division, and he could see the gray of intelligence on Narchala's uniform as he took the podium. The Admiral grabbed a small device from the podium and clicked on it twice. The podium itself started to lower while the image of the military crest disappeared on the widescreen behind him. A hollow projection of the galactic map appeared to replace it. As Admiral Hollis has stated, he began, as the image settled and focused on the galactic north. Much talk has been heard about the Empire's movements and current placement. This was their territory as of 4 to 5 years ago. He clicked again, and a line started to form around the area that contained Bastion, Monolinst, Valak 7, Yaga Minor, and Borosk. It was roughly twice the size of the territory that Catan controlled on the opposite side of the galaxy. Jedi intelligence has shared with us a report at the time of Imperial stormtroopers that were present on Renvar while they were locked in a battle. At the same time that our forces, in concert with the New Republic, were in combat with the Bothans over Endor. Since then, the Imperial political structure and its fleets have changed significantly. Within the last 3 years, their fleet has started to spread out and reclaim lost territory with a vengeance. At this time, we estimate that their borders are along these lines. He clicked once more and a new line started to form. This one was far longer, and several murmurs were coming from the group commanders while the line continued to travel until it encircled the vast majority of the galactic north. As you can see, they have gone as far trailward as Elam and are stretching, so they are poised to move towards Almania and push into the corporate sector. They have expanded well northward to the edges of the Outer Rim and towards the Tingle Arm. Along with this, they have pushed into the unruined regions and have completely enveloped Chiss space and their capital at Sicila. How far they have pushed rimward from the location and how far coreward is unknown at this time. In known territory, though, they have gone beyond where we engaged them at Ord Canfrey and are positioned to move towards Ord Mantell, Fornax, and Glee Anselm. You might want a helmet for this, Tubba. It's about to get interesting and intense. Excuse me, Admiral. A Marine general called from a few sections over from where Wes and Payne were sitting. Am I to understand that they are on a quest to reclaim former territory and power that they started to lose after the first battle over Endor? I can't claim to know Asard and Nakova's plans and intentions, Nartala chilled him. But the territory they've claimed, the rate they're claiming it, and the power they're using to get it could point to no other conclusion at this time. There were several other murmurs across the auditorium as Payne lifted his own hand. On that note, sir, he asked as he checked notes on his datapad, there have been only talks and rumors spread of the fleet size and strength he used at Ord Canfrey. I was going to reach that in a moment, Admiral Payne, but now is as good a time as any. There's one for you. There's a helmet emo for you. think that's a tier 3. Yes, it's a tier 3 sub people. Notala changed images on the screen and showed several hollows taken from Ord Kenfrey. Wes and Mather noted index notes of each image from CSS Arcane, 3rd Battle Group's flagship, and several other vessels during the battle. Captain Harkness, the Admiral said as he handed the clicker to another intelligence officer. If you would, please. Aye, sir, the captain said as he walked to the stage and started to highlight several ships in the images. As you can see, the Imperials have several new designs that we're completely unfamiliar with. The majority of these are smaller classes, ranging from frigate escort types to heavy cruisers. Their performance and firepower match similar class types employed by us in the New Republic. Only 2 Imperial-class Star Destroyers were present, Mark IIs, he continued, highlighting the ships. The Empire has usually employed more of these during an engagement of this size. We can only assume at the moment that there has been a shift in Imperial doctrine regarding the order of battle. Okay. Here we go. Captain, if I may for a moment? A voice came from the audience. Payne looked over and noticed that the person was Admiral Connors, 6th Battle Group's commander. Certainly, Admiral, Harkness said as he yielded the floor. From what the Jedi told us of the events during their battle several years ago, their opponent used several ships of that class and multiple Super Star Destroyers. Would it not be a sensible assumption that the Empire has kept several of those back from our notice? It is entirely possible, sir, Harkness told him and the others present. We still have no information on the size or composition of the force used against the Chiss. Our only estimates can come from what we have learned at Ord Kenfrey and through our other intelligence sources. As I said, the appearance of only 2 Star Destroyers caught our attention to the possibility of a doctrinal shift. However, what has surprised our analysts was another ship class that 3rd Group ran up against. He clicked again where a single image showed on the screen and enlarged it enough to see the ship in question. Just the image was bringing a lot of quiet talk among the personnel. We counted 6 of these Nebula-class cruisers with Imperial markings on all of them, Harkness said as he pulled up a general layout of the ship type. But that's a New Republic-designed ship, Connor said from his seat. Several others voiced their agreement. How were the Imperials able to obtain the schematics? That's unknown at this time, Admiral. Nor can we determine if there's been any information of a serious defection of New Republic forces. But there have been actions by the New Republic that bring that into question, Halda Soto, 1st Group's commander, stated from where he sat. Nochala stood and took the briefing from there, but Soto kept on. Sir, word has reached all fleet commanders of the events that happened outside the system some time ago. About a reconnaissance mobile suit with New Republic markings scouting our home system. Wes and Payne both perked up about where this might be going, but then they should have known that word of the incident had spread fleet-wide. The 2nd Group discovered and cornered the mobile suit, and careful strategy from the Admiral and Master Stefan Card resulted in the recon suit being held in a secure location and its pilot held in custody. It's true, Admiral Hollis told everyone. The mobile suit in question has been taken to a secured location, and its pilot is being held in maximum security, undergoing interrogation. We don't know why the suit was sent, but we do know from the logs that it was recording information on several locations, primarily our fleet berths on Catane's upper hemisphere, and the shipyard facilities on the lower half. Several ground facilities were also being mapped, but we have nothing to say why as of yet. We can't exactly bring this up to the New Republic military command, as it would be construed as one ally accusing another. Sir, Payne asked, may I make a suggestion on that matter? By all means, Mather, Hollis said. I know that there is a gathering at Master Stefan Carr's residence and that former General Din is probably present. Could she be asked to approach Maxwell on the issue? It's a valid question. One I would highly be interested in discovering the answer to. Thank you, Admiral. I'll see to that. Harkness, please continue with the brief. Aye, sir, Harkness said as he clicked again to pull up a chart on the screen. This is the main order of battle that was taken from all of the image recorders on our ships that survived the encounter. 2 Imperial Mark IIs, we think, possibly acting as the command ships. 6 Nebula-class destroyers were heavy hitters with anywhere from 5 to 10 different classes of combat and support ships. The estimated ship count that the Empire threw into this is 60 to 80 total. Captain, DeSoto started to ask, do we know if this was a single fleet or a joint operation? We believe that it was 2 separate groups, the captain said, as everyone looked over the chart showing the different ship types. It's only a theory by our analysis group, but a good one. If the Imperial classes were acting as command ships, then the numbers of the other classes present could be split, and you would have 2 groups with the same number of ship types. So we could say they're using the same number of ships in one group as we do in our own battle groups. We could, Admiral. Payne was making notes of all of this. If 2 separate groups were employed, then the number matched precisely with those of Gatani Battle Group. Most of the senior commanders present knew the specs and capabilities of the Nebula class, and knew that it was on par with their own Loneman class, the heavy hitter and flagships of their battle groups. 3 would be in a battle group, and they had just expanded to 4 with the thought of making it 5 of the class. And while Payne was making his notes, Wesley started making some of his own, and was the next to ask the captain a few questions. What about their fighter composition? Payne glanced up at that question and saw several others, the other CAGs and Marine Wing commanders nodding in agreement. Fighters seem to be TIEs of a type we haven't identified yet, Harkness said as he pulled up a few reference images. I can solve that for you, Wesley said as he looked over all the images, wincing as he did so, and he could imagine the other pilots in the room doing so as well. They're using TIE Defenders, just about the best design Scimitar Systems came up with for that platform. I think I'm seeing some Scimitar bombers as well, a Marine pilot said as he looked over the other images. Quite a few of them. Wesley winced again. This would wreak havoc with his crews, but if the other squadrons were anything like his, they would be looking forward to the fight. I probably know the answer to this question, Payne said as he kept making notes. But do we have any kind of estimate as to the number of fleet groups the Empire has? We don't, sir, Harkness said as he sighed. Another time he had to answer with a "we don't know." Our operations branch is working to discover this, but it will take some time, Admiral Hollis told them from his seat. Information we've obtained from the New Republic is scarce. As Admiral DeSoto mentioned, too many signs show that we cannot fully rely on the New Republic. As much as we've worked together, that comes as hard for me to say as it is for you to hear. We've actually obtained more intelligence through the Jedi than we have from the Republic lately. What exactly is our game plan for right now, Admiral? DeSoto asked. This was what they all wanted to know. As of right now, His Majesty has approved all forces going into a Condition 3 state of readiness. All fleets in dock are to prepare for departure within the next 28 hours for your patrol areas. All fleet elements deployed for over 2 weeks are to return to ports for replenishment and redeployment. Sir, Nagala asked, elements of my group have been in constant rotation on the interdiction of Galan after the events some time back, involving a rogue group that the Mandalorians have been dealing with. Do those units remain on station, rejoin us, or something different? I need to meet with you about that afterward, Bryce, Hollis told him. We have received word from Her Highness that the group in question will be dealt with and we will not have to participate in that action. Are there any other matters? He asked as he looked over the rest of those gathered. If nothing else, the command offices will be open for them later. Now, return to your commands and start preparing for the deployment. Dismissed. They all stood and saluted as the chiefs walked out of the room. Once more unto the breach, Payne said as he looked over at Wesley. I got the feeling we're in this for the entire match, Wesley replied. I wouldn't have it any other way. That's the end of chapter 12. So, Oh, goodness. Okay. Why do you think my mods are making me drink water? um, I also struggle with doing the different voices, so if I stumble a little bit, that's probably why. Yes. You guys can also feel free to poke at the different commands. The great majority of them are actually usable by anybody. There's a few that are restricted to VIP and mods, but as a general rule, anybody can use them. So if you think that I need to drink water, get a snack, take a break, have a stretch, you know, that kind of stuff. So there are some that are exclamation point commands. There are also some that are channel points. So if you've been watching the channel at all, you will have accumulated some channel points and you can play with those. So, and if there's words that are unfamiliar to you, which there will be, please feel free to ask me to translate them. My current snack tonight is, let's see, I have fruit snacks tonight. That is my snack option today. So, I do occasionally have other things. More recently, I have had things like pretzels, pirate's booty, gluten-free Oreos, you know. I know, I'm trying to be really good and healthy with my snack options. The one exception to that probably being the Oreos. But that's something that I'm actually working on because I'm on a little bit of a health journey this year. So I'm trying to be really good with my snack options. So the one concession is like the Oreos. I know. I know, so disappointing, I'm sorry. I mean, having said that, I was eating chips earlier, so I put them away though. Because they're super loud too, so. I try to get things for snacks that aren't going to make a lot of noise. So, and I try to do my snacks on break, like on the ad breaks, so that it's not disruptive and noisy in the mic. So, also, let me know if you guys are having trouble hearing me. I think that I finally got my level sorted. Oh, that's because I haven't figured out how to do noises yet. I need to add one though. Where's my pen? I'm adding that to my list. I have a growing list of things that I need to do for different commands. When I can figure out how to make sound effects work, I'll be all over that. Oh, do I? Yes, I do. Thank you for the reminder. Hold on. One sec. Did you guys hear that okay? I could turn it back up if I need to. Oh, give me a sec. I don't want to, like, blow anybody's eardrums either, so... I mean, you could, but I do have sound effects for various things. I'll have to work on the levels for that. But those are great suggestions. I'll have to add those. Yeah, I have tried to get sound alerts working and just haven't been able to get them to play nice for whatever reason. So for the moment, I have sound effects on Stream Deck. So I just have to work on the levels for that. All right. Okay, it is currently 8:30, so if I cannot get through the chapter by 9, I will go until it is finished. It's not super long. It's about standard length for any of mine, so somewhere between 10 and 15 pages. Alright. But yes, I do have several sound effects, but I do need to work on the levels for those. But they are through Stream Deck and not through sound alerts. So, working on those. Okay. Get a little water. Okay. Alright. Chapter 13. Catan, Jedi Praxium. The morning following Renese's party dawned clear and calm. Marin was up with the sun, as usual, running through her kata in the Praxium's training circle. She knew that she needed to message Master Canadius, but didn't want to wake him. According to Dylan, this council meeting had occurred after the party, and it had run rather late. She shook her head at the thought of him being up this early after such a late night. She continued through her kata, composing the message in her mind. By the time she'd completed, an hour had passed and the sun was climbing into the sky. She went inside and up to her quarters, quickly composing the message on her datapad. We have an ad starting in 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Master Canadius, I've heard that the Kurtzad are moving into Katani space once more. I want to meet with you to discuss how I can help. I know the Katani star systems well. I want to help bring Kurtzad to justice. In service. Marin Durza. She set it to a time delay to send in 20 minutes. Hopefully, she wouldn't wake Zan. Little to Marin's knowledge, Zan had already been up for an hour at the same time she awoke for the day. He had to contact Coruscant, reach his Padawan, and arrange for the transfer of intelligence headquarters from the Galactic Center to Catan. Also, getting Sharon and Althea to clean out the remaining stuff from Callistus and his shared unit in the temple, and getting Sharon and Althea's stuff squared away in the Pragila's holds. Zan's final message to Sharon was typical bluster. And if you two screw around with the systems again, I'll find something here that will teach you to the meaning of not messing with a Mandalorian. You got the codes, and STC is aware of your journey, so hop to it. Zan closed the comm and proceeded with his morning meditations. After the council session, the mood was somber, and he knew it would affect him. 20 minutes later, his meditations had ended, and while his mood didn't change, he was at least calmer. He sighed loudly and was going to rise to his feet when his message chime sounded. He grabbed his helmet and slipped it on to find a message from Marin. After reading the message, he grinned before checking his system link to find Marin's location, and to his surprise, he found that she remained in her quarters at the Praxium. He snagged the comm code and then calmed her station directly. How many times do you need to be told, Durza? It's Zan. Leave the master Ossic for the Artise, he growled as she initiated the feed on her end. Marin blushed and then grinned. Jade the Fartura to you too, Zan, she said with a smile. Do you want me to meet you? Zan grinned at the younger Mandalorian. Alec, I've got to make a run into Edmonton for a few things, but I can meet you later this morning, closer to 1100. You know where the Top Caf is? I do, she answered. I'll meet you there. She then raised an eyebrow. You didn't bother to tell me Etika was coming. He told me himself a few hours ago. Zan raised an eyebrow in response, smirking. He did, Maven. He was supposed to keep that on private channels. Are you messing around in my affairs, Marika? Her eyes widened. Not me. He just told me he was heading this way to talk to you. Nothing more than that, really. Cool your afterburners, Dalish. He laughed. You'll find out why at the Tap Caf. By the way, now that you're old enough, your turn to buy the Tingular and Netrigal. Marin sputtered. Mevin, you heard me. It seems your brewer in Etika made enough of an impression on the owner so he knows how to get the stuff and make a decent Tingular. I'm more receptive to things on a full stomach, he said. She blinked and then nodded. All right. Anything else? Naish, unless Andrea already has plans for you. If she does, tell her to come with you. Marin shook her head. She's busy talking to some of the colonists. She was silent for a moment. Some want to settle on the forest moon and the Tanaga system. Anyways, I'll pass it along, though. Zan scowled a bit at the new information, but then nodded. 1100 hours, then. With that, he closed the channel. Marin breathed and frowned as Zan's image disappeared from her screen. Well then, I'd best get moving, she told herself as she checked the time display on her datapad. It read 0930. Shaking her head, she dashed into the fresher and showered, dressing in a clean tunic and trousers when she'd finished. Sure, she'd been to the Tap Cafe in town, but she'd just come from Edmonton mere hours before. She shook her head and brushed out her hair, braiding it again as she grabbed her full weapons belt. She'd left all but her saber when she'd gone to the castle. Buckling it on, she slipped a crud chip into her belt pouch, hoping it was enough. Between what Jarius had left her and what she earned on bounty missions when she went with Ethan, she had a lot. She shrugged off the thought and took the stairs to the courtyard 2 at a time. And I'm gonna stop there because we have an ad coming up in 3 seconds. I'll see you guys in a minute and a half. And we're back from our ads. Thanks for hanging around, guys. Oh, Rusty Tools is at it again. Alright. There we go. Ugh. excuse me, sorry. It didn't take her long to make it to the stables and saddle her usual mount. The brown mare was well accustomed to Marin and responded well to the girl's commands as she guided her gently down the trail. 30 minutes later, she was coming into Edmonton. The tap calf wasn't far, and she reached it in good time, making her way inside to settle things with the owner. Meanwhile, Zan struck into town to stock up on supplies he knew he would need for the next little while. With the others now more prone to assist in the areas he was struggling with, he could concentrate on other things for the time being. Marin was going through her vergotten now, and the reason she calmed him earlier in the day was the same thing he decided to give her for her trial. But to do so, they needed to be supplied. After grabbing the essentials they needed for the hunt, he made his way to the tap calf. Before Zan's first exposure to Catan and Callista's acceptance of the lifestyle, Mandalorians were not well regarded by the Catani. Thankfully, the exposure that he and others, including young Marin, had to the population went a long way to understanding Catan's acceptance of their lifestyle, and Mandalorians' acceptance of Catani culture. As he walked into the tap calf, he was taken aback by the cleanliness of the place and the friendly people in the establishment. Still feels like a library more than a tap calf, he thought to himself before he spotted Marin's table. He walked through the crowd and slipped into the booth without saying much, taking a large gulp of Netragal first. Copper's Reserve. Finally some decent Netragal here for a change. Marin smiled, sipping at her mug of Behot. She'd yet to develop a taste for Netragal. You know, I was just down here yesterday afternoon. Well, not here, but at the castle, she said, quietly as she contemplated her tea mug for a moment. Zan grunted at that while he took another mouthful of the casserole. He chewed thoughtfully, and then swallowed, before responding. And? Marin shrugged. Andrea had wanted me to talk to some of the colonists. I had a chance to ask questions of my own. I've no problem with them settling on the moon as long as they stay the fairfick away from my land. The northern hemisphere's no good for them anyway, being farmers. They agreed. The formal agreement is being drawn up as we speak. She sighed. I felt no deceit from them, and I did probe them. She ducked her head, remembering Andrea's words about asking forgiveness rather than permission. How many colonists are we talking about, Nervald? He asked before taking another mouthful of the spicy dish. Marin took a bite of her own, savoring its spiciness for a moment before answering. No more than 50. Zan's face clouded a bit. I don't see why you're getting your shebs in a knot, Marika. 50 is better than 500 or 5,000. Plus, perhaps with their presence, the Kurtzad will take the hint and leave the moon alone. Zan sighed after swallowing. But that's why you've contacted me. What do you know of the latest movements? That got her attention. What does Kurtzad have to do with the colonists? She asked, shaking her head. Not much, really. All I know is they're trying to push into Catani space again. That's been old news for at least a year. I take it Etika hasn't told you much about what's been happening on Mandayam and other Empire worlds. Marin shook her head. I haven't heard much about that, but from what Andrea told me, they are trying to push their way back in system here and recently. Zan sighed. We're in civil war, Mariga. The Protectorate keeps getting bombarded with attacks, seemingly at random. Before I left for Catan, Sharon picked up the latest. Kirimura was attacked hard, aiming at the food supply, and they also went for Mendel Motors. What? Marin almost choked on her lunch. Is anything being done to either aid the Protectorate or stop Kurtzad? Zan sighed. The Tsad Jorotin are too worried about the rat cans to do anything, and given that it's that mere Ossic Maxwell in control of the New Republic chain of command, I doubt they'd lift a finger right now. I sent in an aid crew with Agricorps members before I left, but we can't keep doing so for long. The Jedi are fighting a battle on several fronts, and we're not just assisting. Marin slumped slightly. She'd seen how worn out and stressed Master Card had been lately. Come to think of it, Zan looked tired himself. I want to help, but how can I? I'm only one person. Zan smiled. You can, and you will, Marika. He placed a hand on top of hers briefly. We may not be ready yet to take out the Kurtzad completely, but we can do something to let them know we have awoken. She frowned again, and her blue eyes sought his. How? Was all she asked. Zan took another long draught of the black ale and swallowed before grinning. Well, we have an attempt at an incursion in Katani space that keeps getting deflected but not taken out, right? Elec, Marin nodded as she tried to determine where he was going with this. You want my help? What could I possibly do? You've heard Goten. What else? Zan said before taking another bite of his meal, letting her process that information. My... what? You're... She stopped and really looked at him, reaching out to him in the force. You're not joking. Zan nodded. You're the only one left right now of your elite. That makes you an Allure, but you haven't received your Vodgoten, and it needs at least 2 Allure to witness the trial. What better way for that than a hunt? Marin gasped. 2 Allure. Etika. But then, why would he tell me he was coming? She frowned, falling silent as she tried to process this. Zan frowned. Why wouldn't he tell you he was coming? He shook his head. We just wanted to wait until one of us saw you in person to tell you, is all. Marin nodded. Sorry, it's a lot to take in right now. She drained her behut, taking another bite of the casserole as she tried to order her thoughts. And then she laughed a bit. I guess I should have expected it. I haven't exactly been quiet about it being my goal to bring down Kurtzad. And not just for Buer either, but for everyone whose families have been torn apart. She finished her last words firmly. Zan smiled again. Elec, plus you are old enough and have enough skills now to do this properly, and doubly so since Andrea's taken you on. Apart from you making googly eyes at a certain other student. Marin blushed crimson at that and busied herself with eating before she responded. Jared and I are making our studies our priorities, Anne. Elec, and I'm sure the studies on the inner workings of the mouth have done you both great service, he said with a smirk. But, all that aside, he's been knighted by now, and it's time you matched him. This may not be knighthood, but it's just as important. She blushed again, slightly flustered. She decided to distract herself by talking about the trial. So, I know what I'll be doing. The next questions are when and how, though I suppose the how is left up to me? She asked with a raised eyebrow. Zan nodded. Well, as long as Kurtzad are sent to Dariam, how is in your hands. When? That can be as soon as Sharon and Althea get in from Corathonta. We'll need to make a plan, but this should be elite only for now, he said, referring to the bond that Ethan had in Marin's life and the bond that Sharon had with Zan and Althea with Callista. Though I'm unsure if Andrea wants to do this herself. She can't, Zan. The risk is too great. She has an Ecod now, Marin said, thinking of Ian. And the palace guard would have a heart attack. Zan nodded and blushed a bit, forgetting about all of that. Nisita, you're right. I keep forgetting about things like that lately. Sure would have saved me with the general and the rogue, he mused. Marin gave him a curious look. Mven? Zan shook his head and growled. Council business. Never you mind now. You've got enough on your plate. Marin shrugged and went back to eating. I suppose you'll want to meet with Etika soon? He should be landing within an hour or so at the house. Sorry. Zan nodded. Elec, I want to hear about the situation on Mendiam from him first, and then when the others arrive we can begin to plan this out. Zan finished his meal and sighed. Meanwhile, I want you to sharpen your skills. You've been good with the Jetikad lately, but I want you to polish up your other skills. She frowned. Other skills? You'll need to be a bit more specific. Rippers, blasters, sniping, stealth, knife and bascad work, America. Your heritage. He scowled a bit. What in the name of the Manda do you think I mean? She blushed. I've been working with almost all of those, except the bascad. Etika's been teaching me a lot, but he hasn't touched on that one yet. Zan scratched at his 3-day-old beard. Better get on that then. Tell you what, I'll meet you outside the Praxium's gates for a Beskad lesson tomorrow. Think you're up for that? She stared at him for a moment. Sure. I don't think Andrea has anything scheduled for today. She cleared my schedule after the last meeting, which went late. I'm not free, though. After I'm done with Etika, I've got more planning with the council and the rest of my elite. Shut up, Stefan, for putting me on the council. Card Estate. Landing pad. Ethan ran his hands through the gray hair as he punched the control to lower the boarding ramp. He tried to hold in a yawn, but he just went ahead and did it as he watched the ramp lower and noticed that Zan and Marin were standing on the pad waiting for him. You weren't kidding when you said you really needed to talk to me, did you? He asked as he descended to the permacrete. Barely give the engine thrust coils a chance to cool. Marin grinned at him and tucked a few loose strands of hair behind her left ear. She'd gotten taller since she'd last seen him and didn't have to look up at him anymore. Sakoi, Etika, she said. Zan held back a smirk as Ethan spoke. Well, I think a hunt of this magnitude deserves quick action, Novad. Would you rather I let you cool your heels with the Padawans at the Praxium? Ethan gave him a look. The day I need to cool my heels is the day they'll be shoveling dirt in my face. He looked at Marin and winked, and then regretted it with the bruise he had on that side, and just hugged her. Missed you too, girl. You're getting taller on me, though. Marin smiled. Alec, it's been a while. She looked him over and frowned disapprovingly, the bruise purpling his right cheek. Are you all right? It's just a shiner, he said as he greeted Zan with the warrior's grip. Played Dariam getting out of Renvar on that recount you sent me on, Zan. Zan grimaced. Not surprising. The Rutkans are trying to ensure everything is shorn up before a bigger push forward. Plus, whatever they found there, it's worth keeping an eye on the source of the info. He looked at Ethan closely for a minute. Rutkans or something else? Rutkans at Renvar, Ethan said as he unfolded a sheet of the Galactic map and laid it on the Duracrete of the landing pad, pointing out locations to Zan. The Hutts had moved up from Jabim to Handouin and decided to crash the vacation spot at Iago, almost as if they might want to think about making a push towards Mon Calamari. I barely escaped notice at Renvar, but the Rutkans looked ready to send a recon screen to Osis. Figured he'd want to know that right quick. Marin looked back and forth between them, utterly confused. She had been keeping tabs on the holonews lately, but nothing they talked about made sense to her. This time it wasn't a grimace so much that he blanched. It's begun, Zane murmured, and his eyes grew distant, reliving his vision. Oh, it gets better, Nervald, Ethan said as he looked up. Zane shook his head to clear the mental cobwebs. What else? Word around the camp says that our old friend Thanos Joran isn't laying low anymore, Ethan said as he pointed to a few other systems. What I caught on Vajun while hanging around is that he and a few of his Kirtsad cronies are talking about causing some havoc. One source said something about them laying mines along the Hydian and Preliminary routes at different points inside the Mid-Rim. And now, who do you suppose would benefit from them doing that? Marin's face went still. Isn't Joran the one who... Zan growled. Son of a Sith harlot! He smacked a fist into his gloved palm. Yes, America, he is. And he's gotten bolder, too, in the last few years. He's said to have slain a few Kiratsad capos to gain room to maneuver. Marin frowned. Any mention of Kiratsad movements in Katani space recently? As for Kiratsad reports in Katani space, the Black Hawks beat back a pirate convoy a few days ago. No word if that was a disguised probe or not. He's gone maverick, Zan, no doubt, Ethan said as he looked at Marin. I did hear something about a probe at Catan and not much else, but they've had a few holdings south of here at Amwat and Iriadu and may have had them for a while. If Catan were a target, that'd be the closest place to launch it. But even Kirtsad, or Duran for that matter, ain't crazy enough to try to take a fight to these people. Dariam, the deal with the Bothans should have taught everyone that lesson. The mention of Catan's foremost fighter squadron piqued her interest. How come I'm not hearing any of this? Why else would they come to Catan, then? Unless they wanted to test them for something else, I don't know. Marin frowned. They traced Buir here often enough to know where he was at any given time. What if they're trying to track down his associates? Zan smirked at Marin. You ain't on council yet, that's why. Besides, you've been busy with Andrea, and this is the first time since we've talked in Edmonton that I could get a hold of you for more than a few minutes. He scowled. Testing sounds right, but Duran isn't that stupid to come after his associates. Not unless he's gotten suicidal. I think there's something around here that we've missed. No, we're almost on the chapter. Stay! No, Zenny! You're gonna miss it. Ethan looked at Marin knowingly and leaned back to sit on the edge of the boarding ramp. Do you think he's playing foot soldier or middleman instead of running his own show? Marin frowned. It's possible. She shrugged off Ethan's glance for the moment and sank down beside him, twisting her Padawan braid in her fingers. Though, that doesn't make sense. From what I know of him, he's not the type to take orders well, unless the party in question is paying very well. She phrased the last as a question. Zan blinked. Marika, your lands, is there any indication from what your Buer left you that something might be valuable in your lands? She looked across at him. I'm not sure, to be honest. It's a possibility. I know he left a lot to me. I still haven't figured out what all he left. There's really no telling, Ethan said, putting in his 2 creds worth. Those ranges cover several thousand kilometers. Marin nodded. I just recently got out of talks with the minister. Some colonists wanted to settle on the moon in the Tanaga system. I've agreed to let them settle in the southern hemisphere. It's more suitable to their needs. I felt no malice or ill intent from them. I haven't had much time to look for anything he might have left hidden anyways. Zan started to pace, a clear sign of agitation. In the old days, an Allure was given his own small fleet of ships and resources to call upon in times of great need. Jarius' case would be an example of such a needed gift. And we know Jarius maintained a close bond with his Katani Vode. I wonder. Marin frowned. Could we perhaps see if the Blackhawks would be willing to help? They're gearing up for something, Ethan told her. There's been a lot of fleet movement in and out of Katane, but I've seen Valkyrie moving out. Wherever she is, the Blackhawks are there too. Marin's face fell. Shasa, there goes that idea. All the better. The last rumor I heard was that Joran got his hands on a Kaldabe, and you know he's itching to use it. That got Ethan's attention. Where in the Manda did you hear about that? A what? Marin looked at Ethan, confusion coloring her expression. Again, this time with a translation, please? Sharon calmed me last night after our latest aid crew reached Mandayam. Apparently, one of the Verdad Allure was a sympathizer and let Duran walk away with a squadron and the Kaldabe from our post at Conquered Dawn. Zan paused and looked at Marin. The Kaldabe have had enough firepower to take on a Vic-2 Star Destroyer and come out unscathed. It's one of the largest ships Mandel Motors makes. Marika, couple that with the mass drivers and shield leacher tech they possess, and suddenly places such as your farm become mulch. She swallowed. Perfect. Do the Katani have anything that could match that? Ethan thought about that for a long moment. A Kaldabe wouldn't stand much of a chance against that class Valkyrie belongs to, and going against a battle group would be suicide. He'd have to use it for hit and fades. He chuckled some. They've got one type I've only heard about. It's smaller, but I've heard rumors that it could take on an Imp-Deuce by itself. But why bother if he knows it won't last against the Valkyrie? Marin asked with a frown. Duran is anything but a brilliant strategist. If there is something he wants, he goes for it. Thinking wisely requires brains, and Kiritsa doesn't have them, Zan told her. She looked at Ethan, raising an eyebrow as her gaze slid to Zan. If you want my help, being vague doesn't help any of us. That's a fact, Ethan said as he got up and dusted himself off. Is there any calf around? I haven't had a good cup in a while. Zan chuckled. Yeah, let's get you to the house. I could use a cup myself. And as they started walking, he smirked at Marin. I'm not being vague. I'm being more card-ish. Something I have to learn to cultivate. Ethan looked across at him. Be like Card? You? Since when did you become a comedian? Marin made a face at Zan and then shrugged. Zan's different from the last time I saw him, but she couldn't put her finger on exactly why. Since the Barv put me through a ringer and got me to accept a council position. That's what, Zan grumbled. Don't say it. I know. Bloody Galaxy won't last a week. I've heard it already. You do know who my father-in-law is. Marin giggled. I bet that was interesting. That got Ethan's attention, and he bellowed a laugh and then slapped his shoulder. On the council? That's rich. And then he looked closer at Zan and could tell that it wasn't a joke. Well, ain't that a kick in the shebs? She glanced sideways at Zan. You weren't expecting it, were you, Zan? Zan sighed. Naish, feels more like a kick in the Boise, though. He groaned as they reached the doorway. He opened it and motioned for the others to enter before him. Marika, I'm not sure you want to know why I was expecting it. She raised an eyebrow at him, but something told her she really didn't want to know. If you want to tell me, have at it. I'm not an Adik anymore, you know, she said by way of gentle rebuke. Zan chuckled. You haven't completed your Rodgoten yet, Marika. His face fell, though. But we're facing something more dangerous than the Sith threat we faced 3 years ago. She fell silent. Isn't my Verdgoten why Etika is here? Jade looked around the corner, saw Ethan coming in, and gave him a look. I'm sorry, my lady. I haven't had time to dust off properly. I'll take a cup of caf and head outside. He then looked over at Marin and then to Zan. The Verdgoten? That's what you're thinking? Marin could only nod, as Ethan hadn't told her anything else. We have an ad starting in just under 5 minutes. What better time for it, Nervad? Zan looked at Ethan hard, especially now if Andrea is adamant about those colonists settling on the moon. Plus, we know that Kirtzad are up to something. Thamanda is moving us in this direction, and you know as well as I do, she's better prepared than most of our Adik are now. Ethan accepted the cup from Jade, stepping back on the front porch. He then sat on the steps and sipped at his cup. If ever there was a sure way to do that, this is it. After getting a cup of Beehot from Jade, Marin made her way onto the porch and leaned against one of the columns as she sipped at it. Ethan sipped his caf and looked up at the mountains beyond the estate, gathering his thoughts. How many settlers? From where? Zan mouthed to Jade. Sorry for the dust. I'll clean it up soon, before turning his attention back to the other two. Marika knows more about that than I, Etika. They're from Telos, and not more than 50, Marin said, hiding a smile as she saw Jade's look. Farmers, you said? He asked as he still sipped his cup and enjoyed the view. Alec, farmers, Marin said quietly as she looked out over the gardens. That's what Andrea keeps saying. I'm sure Marika might believe it at some point, but she's been touchy about that. Ethan said as he kept looking. What did they say they do with the land, the timber? Miven? Marin whirled on Zan. What do you mean? She turned back to Ethan at his question. The delegation said they'd use as many natural materials as possible. That surprised me as it shows a respect for the land similar to that of the Katani. They have the tools and machinery to do so. Nerf dung, Ethan said as he took a long drink from his cup. Zan, you might ask Jade to call Andrea over here as soon as possible. Zan raised an eyebrow. Okay. Why? Marin frowned. Etika? I sense no deceit from them. I've never seen a house on Telos made with natural materials, Ethan told them both, and the planet's full of timbers. Zan looked taken aback a bit, but nodded and made his way into the house. That's at Marin frowning again. But Andrea didn't sense they were lying either. About that part they may not have been, he said between sips. I don't doubt you or her ability to tell if someone is hiding something. They may actually treat the land like that, but they're not from Telos. Marin looked at him sharply. What makes you say that? And wouldn't the Katani government notice something like that? Meanwhile, Zan had found Jade in the kitchen. He stopped and leaned on the countertop. Jade, do you know if Andrea is available? Ethan and Marin are discussing the colonist issue, and Ethan looks perturbed. Catan doesn't have relations with everybody, Marika. No one does. They could be from an area they are afraid to or ashamed to mention for fear of rejection. He turned to look at Zan as he came back onto the porch. And quit acting like a Cathar with a shubs full of sand, will ya? Marin frowned. Is it possible they could be part of one of Joran's probes into Katani space? She asked wearily. He thought about it for a moment. How'd their hands look? Zan caught that and frowned as well. You have met them, haven't you, Marika? Yes, I have. A few, anyway. Marin frowned at Ethan's question but closed her eyes momentarily. She searched her memory. The ones I met, their hands were rough, and they all looked worn, kind of like a favorite pair of pants, like they'd worked hard. The rest of them are still on their ship at Kingston Port. Zan scowled but pulled off his gloves, knowing his hands were somewhat worn. Did they look like mine? The cuts and scarring on his hands were evident, as were the bones that looked like they had been reset far too many times. She glanced down at Zan's hands, gently taking one of them in hers as she traced the lines, and felt the roughness of his skin. Alec, they looked a lot like yours, Zan. Zan looked over at Ethan. Well, now. It could go either way, Ethan told him. If they do as they said, they might have hard-working hands, too. Their ship is at Kingston, you said? Marin nodded. Do you want me to come with you? He nodded and then looked over at Zan. We need to check it out. Tomorrow, if not sooner. Marin glanced at Ethan. Maven? Why the sudden concern? Do you think it's part of a probe by Joran? There's only one way to find out. And that's the end of chapter 13. Oh, I'm pretty much on the money. Sorry, that was a little bit more than 5 minutes. Didn't quite realize how long that was. But it is 9 o'clock. We're about to go into an ad. So, yeah. I'm gonna get some water. Zenny, if you're still here, I hope you get some good rest tonight. I'm about ready to call it an evening. We're about to be in an ad, so kind of waiting that one out. Give it a few seconds. There we go. Okay. So that was the end of chapter 13. I was going to see about reading chapter 14 tonight, but, yeah. You, innocent? I don't know about that. All right. I'm gonna see if we have anybody to raid. Okay. uh. Okay. Let's see. I'm checking to see if there's anybody that I can raid. Okay. Let's see. If anybody's got any suggestions for somebody I could raid, I'm looking for somebody in the writing and reading category to share the love a little bit. So, oh, actually, yes, that would be a great person to raid. I didn't realize that he was doing his 4-year stream anniversary. That's a great idea. Thanks for that suggestion, Tubba. Okay. I haven't actually raided Benny before, so I think I'll do that actually. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think I've actually raided him before. So give me a second. Okay. Alright, yeah, I'm gonna go raid Benji. He is currently playing Star Wars Galaxies, which is really old school. Fun game from what I've seen of it. It should be really interesting. He's a fellow member of the Survivor Squad community. And so we're gonna go say hi to Benji. And I would greatly appreciate if you guys could tag along for that raid and share the love and the cozy vibes. If you guys would love to join me again, I will be live again on... Well, I'm scheduled to be live again next Wednesday with some SWTOR, but I may be streaming again Sunday night with a workshop. I haven't decided yet. It depends on how I'm feeling. So maybe another unscheduled workshop is in the works. We'll see. Let me get this raid started for you guys. So that first raid message is for anybody who is subscribed to the channel, as it has subscriber emotes. The second message is for anybody who is following the channel. Grab whichever message works for you and follow me along on this raid. I appreciate you guys being here this evening, and I hope that you enjoyed the story. I definitely did. It's getting pretty intense. So I hope that you guys enjoyed, and I hope you have a great evening. Get some good rest.